What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about the number 5 recruiting class in the nation, the Texas Longhorns. Texas is arguably coming off one of the most disappointing seasons they've had in program history. There was a lot of hype last year. People thought Steve Sarkisian was going to have them competing for the Big 12 title. That did not happen. They ended up with a 5-7 record. And Sarkisian has his work cut out for him this next year. He's got a lot on his plate. He has a lot of expectation upon him. And at the end of the day, he was still able to land a top 5 class, which is impressive. Texas in the past has been able to recruit really well even before Sarkisian came in and took over the head coaching gig. However, the star talent, the firepower, hasn't been able to produce results on the field. But this is a new year, another recruiting cycle. Steve Sarkisian is entering his second year, and he has a lot of time to produce a winning team with this class. So jumping into the quarterback position, we have Maalik Murphy out of California. He is the 12th ranked quarterback in this class. And you expect him to be a guy that competes with Quinn Ewers for playing time. And he did commit to Texas before Ewers announced that he was transferring over from Ohio State. And hey, if Quinn Ewers doesn't pan out the way people expect him to, Maalik Murphy definitely is a guy that has potential to be a great quarterback at the University of Texas. Going to the running back position, we have Jaydon Blue out of Houston, the number 15 running back in this class. I think he's going to fit very nicely into the running back room. I think he's going to see some touches this year. I think he's going to fit in nicely behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. Texas has been able to run the ball, I think, decently well over the past couple of years, and I expect that to continue, especially with the O-line they were able to pull in this class, and we'll talk about that here later, obviously. But Jaydon Blue, I definitely think he's going to be running back one day for Texas, and he might see a lot of action this first year. Going to the receiver position, surprisingly enough, Texas only had one receiver added to this class along with another transfer I'll talk about later. But Brennan Thompson, he's a 20th ranked receiver in this class. And really with no other freshman receiver coming in, I think Brennan Thompson will get some playing time his first year as well. I expect him to be a leader in the receiving room at some point in the future. Now moving on to the most impressive part of this Texas recruiting class, which is their offensive line. And look, I know NIL played a factor in this. I know they have that new sweet deal for offensive linemen who signed with Texas. But you can't deny that there's still a lot of talent. They still have a lot of firepower. These guys right here are a great group of guys. Devin Campbell and Kelvin Banks, if you haven't watched their highlight tapes, you should, because these guys are just absolute beasts up front. Both at 300 plus pounds. But Steve Sarkisian, he's coached an offense to a national championship before at Alabama. He knows what winning up front looks like, and he sure recruited that in this class. There's no doubt about that. Just kind of looking at what they have, I mean, just from top to bottom, they're just absolutely loaded. I mean, really, any of these guys could start day one at Texas and eventually be a factor in the long run. But Texas is going to have a great wall of offensive linemen in years to come with this group. Now going to the defensive line, Texas was able to land 8 total defensive linemen / edge rushers in this class. And this is a really solid group. This group's made up of a lot of good 4- and 3-star players. One player I'm really high on, I think he's going to be a great player at Texas, is edge rusher Derek Brown from Texas High School in Texarkana. I really like what I've seen from his highlight tapes. And really overall with this group, I mean, you got a 6'7" guy from Austin Westlake, Ethan Burke, as well. I think he's going to play a factor. I think he's going to be a huge factor in this defensive line as well. Defense has been a problem with Texas over the last few years. They haven't really had a good run defense. Overall, their secondary hasn't really been great either. Texas hasn't had many problems on offense. It's really been the defense. So winning up front and starting with a dominating defensive line is definitely the first step that Texas needs to become a national championship contender in the years to come. And now going to the only linebacker of the class is Travell Johnson from Arlington, Texas. He's a 49th ranked linebacker in this class, 3-star. And don't let the stars fool you. This guy's a really good player. I think with being the only linebacker in this class, he's going to have a shot to play in the future. I don't necessarily see him as a day one guy, but here later on down the road, I can definitely see this guy being a playmaker on this defense. And like I said, with defense being the weakness of this team right now, I think this is a guy that can really come along later in his career and be a great player for Texas. Now going on to the secondary of Texas, Terrence Brooks and Brian Allen are two very talented people that I think will for sure be starting by at least their second year. In Texas, the secondary, they've struggled a lot. They haven't been very impressive. But if they're going to get back to the top, Terrence Brooks and Brian Allen are two guys I can see leading the way in this class in the future. I definitely think the sky's the limit for those two players. And then just talking about a group as a whole, I mean, they need to improve as a unit, not just one or two guys per se. But like I said, Texas is always recruiting good talent. They have a lot of high-end four-star guys in their secondary now. And even coming off with a 5-7 record, I definitely see that record improving if guys like Terrence Brooks and Brian Allen can become leaders in that secondary. Austin Jordan's also another guy that I can see becoming a really good player for Texas. He's out at Denton Ryan High School, which is a very elite school in Texas, number 19 safety in the country. If Texas can use these guys to their strengths and really develop them as players, then this secondary can improve a lot from what they were this past year. Now ending off with the transfers, I kind of touched on Quinn Ewers earlier in regards to Malik Murphy and what he's going to do in his future with Texas. But for this next year, I do expect Quinn Ewers to be the starter. I would kind of be surprised if it went any other way at the quarterback position. And then you have Isaiah Nair at wide receiver. I expect him to be a day one starter. I think he's going to be essential in the passing game this year. He was only a 2-star in high school, had a very good career at Wyoming, and he's going to try to showcase his talents at the University of Texas. Jaleel Billingsley is coming over from Alabama. I expect him to be the starting tight end. He had a good career at Alabama. I think he had a little bit of off-field issues going on and ultimately decided to leave Alabama and kind of get a fresh start at Texas. This guy's one of the best tight ends in the nation. I definitely think he's going to fit in very well with the offense, reuniting with Steve Sarkisian. And you have Ryan Watts. I was kind of surprised Ryan Watts transferred from Ohio State. He had a shot to be a starter. Decided to transfer and get another fresh start at Texas. I expect him to be an instant contributor at corner. And kind of like I said with Texas has a good offense. I think Quinn Ewers is going to be a great addition to this team. I think Texas will have an amazing offense next year. In terms of defense, their defense is their biggest question mark. I don't necessarily foresee them winning the Big 12 this next year because of the defense. Now, if they can develop that defense in years to come, and Quinn Ewers can do what everybody's expecting him to do, I really think Texas can become a really good team here in the next few years. And I know they haven't necessarily lived up to expectations the last few years, but Steve Sarkisian can kind of reshape that culture a little bit, kind of hit the reset button, take a step back, and just really fix all the small things that kind of have been going on. Who knows where Texas could be? But regardless, this recruiting class was very impressive from Steve Sarkisian.